Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 17 of the LJL Officially Unofficial podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Alex, otherwise known as Lexie, go by Mars1 on the internet, and of course, I am joined by the impressive Alex, otherwise known as Nymaera Hapgood, and the almost marvelous Sam, otherwise known as Initialize Hapgood. The Hapgood brother duo that are my casters, my co-hosts. Gentlemen, as I say, always introduce yourselves.
Almost marvelous, almost magnificent. You so nearly had it, Sam. But we believe in you. You'll get there someday, of course. Big welcome to the...
He'll digivolve into it, right?
Yeah, sure, that one. And we are joined by the mellifluous Alexander.
Ooh.
Master Swan.
And my question is, Nymaera, do you even know what mellifluous means?
It means honey-like.
He does got it! There we go.
It's one of my favorite adjectives. It is one heck of a word. I very much enjoy that one.
It is our mother's favorite word.
Getting a little bit insight of Mama Hapgood. Very good.
Great, we do love our mum. She's pretty awesome.
I mean, there are mums around the League of Legends world, so I mean, peace out to the mums out there. We love you as well because you support us and got us here, and if it wasn't for your support, we wouldn't have professional players, we wouldn't be here to give the coverage for those, and we wouldn't have the support of our own mothers. Oh, yeah, no, plurals, because I was about to be like, we haven't got 3 mothers. No, wait, that's still plural.
We have got 2.
Yeah, we got 2 here, it's fine.
More than the one.
But we are the LJL Officially Unofficial casters, Nymaera, Initialize, and myself, Mars1. Initialize. But what is this podcast? What is it?
Well, this is a podcast where we talk about Japanese League of Legends. And we sort of think about providing some content in English for an audience that may otherwise not get any content at all, because there is no official content in English for the LJL. Did you not know that?
No, I didn't. And there's no one talking about it in English either?
No, none at all. It's only in Japanese. So here we are making content.
That's crazy. Though, Nymaera, though, I must insist that we have to be a part of Riot Games or any of their affiliates, right? We have some form of affiliation with them, of course.
And lo, the gods at Riot did say, we don't know these people, they do it themselves. We have absolutely no affiliation with Riot or Riot Japan or Riot anywhere. In fact, we are just 3 people in London talking mad crap about Japanese League of Legends.
On the 7th day, they might cut us a break and give us a job. But
we've got to prove that for the 7th day to come. The Sabbath may come one day for us, but with that all said, anything, of course, is all our own views and opinions. This does not represent any of Riot Games' partners, as Nymaera was saying, as well as also this is our own thoughts and opinions, and also does not represent the LJL Officially Unofficial cast. This is purely just the podcast that it happens to be along the same name. We, of course, do have our social media channels. If you are watching on YouTube, you will be able to see below. We do put it in the podcast notes, but if you're listening right now and you're just looking at Twitter while listening, you can find us at LJL Unofficial or on any other channel on LJL_officially_unofficial. Also, we do have a Discord. If you are interested in joining our Discord, we will have a link down below, or you'll be able to find it in the show notes. You'll also be able to find this podcast on all major streaming platforms for your audio pleasurable needs. And if you go on Apple Podcasts and give us them 5-star review, that would be greatly appreciated by all of us here.
Absolutely.
But
don't rate us, we're great.
With that all said, gentlemen, I think it's about time that we try and get into the meat and potato salad of all of this in regards to what we're going to be covering on our podcast today. The first part is we're going to be saying we don't actually have much more to say about the mid-season streamathon. We've
not yet.
At the time of recording this on the 26th of May at approximately, let's just call it 6 p.m. There is currently no new information, and we've been kind of keeping an eye on it. When we do find information, we will be updating our Twitter, our Discord, and we will definitely be covering it in the podcast episode that we do find out more information. But with that little tidbit done and dusted, let's get into our first main topic. And this was a topic that actually Nymaera and Initialize, I believe, came up with. So I'm actually going to pass it over to you two gentlemen to introduce the topic.
Do you mind if I take this one, Sam? I know I introduced quite a few of them, but...
I know it was your idea the last week, so I would feel slightly disingenuous to take it away from me.
I don't even know the meaning of the word. So
Yes.
basically, the topic is we wanted to again think of something which would buy some time, some airwaves, so you could kind of listen to us for a decent chunk of time, talking about something which was relatively valuable. One thing which we have harked on about within a couple of podcast episodes, a couple of casts as well, is where we think the LJL stands in the greater context of the league ecosystem, in terms of how well do we think the teams are doing? Do we think that they are good, they are bad? And in relation to what leagues and what seasons as well. So we figured what we would do, we'd go through a couple of theoretical head-to-head matchups between a couple of our LJL Spring 2020 teams and put them against either current teams in other regions or previous teams in other regions or previous teams in the LJL, and have a think about how we think they would do in those matchups and see if that can accurately portray how we think the LJL is doing currently. So we have 3 matchups which we're going to go through.
Yeah, so let's go into that first matchup that we're going to be comparing, and that is going to be 2017's Rampage Gaming facing off against the current iteration, the 2020 DFM. Now, obviously, there is going to be a bit of crossover between the players, the champions, rosters, and everything else, as some of the members that played in this team went on to play in similar teams. One of the members of this team actually ended up playing in the current roster of DFM, so is going to be an interesting comparison between players. Were they better when they were older or younger or current? It's going to be a big one. So let's first run down the current DFM roster, as I think that makes more sense, and then I'll hand it over to one of you to cover the 2017 Rampage roster. So obviously you know them well enough. We've got Ebby in the top lane, Steel in the jungle, Seros in that mid lane, Utapon in the bot lane, and Gang in the support role. And for 2017 Rampage, who's got it up in front of them? I do also
I've got it up in front of me. Yes.
Gotcha.
So it would have been Ebby in the top lane. It would have been, I believe, it is
Tussle.
who's in the jungle? Tussle in the jungle. It is Ramune in the mid lane. It is Yutori Mayashi at AD carry, and Dara would have been at the support role.
Okay. So, where do we want to begin with this? Do we want to start doing top lane Ebby versus 2017 Ebby? Like...
Let me at least throw some context, because obviously this was my call putting this one out there. So I might as well just give some context to why I put this in here. And this is specifically saying that, like, actually, if I am looking back through the history of the LJL, is there a team at all that could have contested the current iteration of DFM that's not already in the league as we're speaking? And we've seen what Sengok Gaming and the likes can do, but is there any other historical team that might have been able to contest the top of the table, really? And the one that probably does spring to mind is the 2017 Rampage roster, which had some of these superstars of the LJL at their absolute peaks. This is a team that I believe went to Rift Rivals and crushed Rift Rivals. I think they went 3-1 overall over there. They did a really good work. So this was a roster that seemed to find quite a lot of success and beat DFM in both playoffs that year.
Yeah, like, this was the team that basically actually went toe-to-toe. And this lineup, like, from spring 2017, where they came second in the spring season, to then win the playoffs, go to MSI, do half decently for a Japanese team in relative respect to how we've done historically. You can look back, and this is actually one of the better performances at MSI. Rift Rivals.
We didn't win anything, but it was at least there was some players who looked okay, right?
Yeah, so it's like, and that's where we get to really look at this, right? I mean, I think the best thing you get to compare is Ebby. Was 2017 Ebby as good as current Ebby? Or is current Ebby just an evolved form or an improved, more refined version?
One thing which I'd say about previous iterations of Ebby is that sometimes he got a bit one-dimensional. He would go continually back to the Gnar pick, and we have seen that in a number of seasons besides 2017 as well. And, he's found really good success on that pick. That is why, we saw him at Worlds last year against Splice, solo killing Vizichachi. We have mentioned that so many times because it was an important thing, and he did really well. Congrats, Ebby. You solo killed a very good top laner.
Yeah.
I think current Ebby, 2020 Ebby, has shown he can play multiple roles within the team, particularly coming up to finals versus Sengoku. I was very impressed with how he just went onto his own and did different things. We have seen him do crazy stuff on set this split. That's something which obviously 2017 Ebby didn't have available to him. And I think that overall, I think Ebby has developed his style of play. So if you put him up against himself from 3 years earlier, I think he'd wipe the floor with him.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you.
I think. Yeah, go for it.
The question is, it's always difficult for me to say, like, top laner in a 1v1 is... How often is it a 1v1 in the top lane? How often is it a 3 versus 2, a 2 versus 2, a dive under the lane? Like, the top lane is such a volatile space in some ways, because half the time it's an island, and half the time that island is getting invaded by the rest of the map. And it can sometimes be a little bit difficult to call that lane in isolation. So once, I think Lexie's probably got his own thoughts on that 1v1 as well. I'd be curious to see what you guys think about the 2v2, and maybe, yeah, probably the 2v2 is the best place to look as well. They're adding the junglers into that equation as well.
I mean, from my perspective, he was a 21-year-old at this point. He'd been playing competitive League for about 2 years by this point, really, you could argue. Though he really probably started playing on 7th Heaven is when everything really started going for him.
I missed that team. I missed that team.
So, like, on 7th Heaven is
they were
where...
very good, but they were fun.
Yeah, exactly. But that's when he really started actually showing up. And that wasn't until mid to early 2015. So by this point, he'd been playing for about a year and a half, you could argue, competitive League of Legends. But then by the end of his tenure on Rampage, he had left and gone on to DFM. And since DFM, he's never missed a Worlds in the LJL. He's the longest going Japanese player to Worlds. He has gone to every Worlds since 2017.
And the reason that is because all the other people that would be in contention, he stopped going to Worlds in this Rampage and Pentagram lineups. That's what he did. He just, every team he was on, found success. This is why it's interesting, because honestly, when we compare, well, if we were going to compare DFM to another team without Ebby, you have to go, yeah, I guess the other team doesn't have Ebby, so that's going to really suck. So comparing Ebby to Ebby, I think if we called it a moot point and said, okay, well, whatever, let's move on to the rest of the map.
Relatively even, perhaps. Especially
I would give the edge to 2020 Ebby, but like it's not going to be the shutout which it would be some other teams.
No, but I think that's experience. This has been 3 years of experience on DFM now, and well, over 3 years of experience now on DFM. Yeah. So like you have to imagine he's not only gotten better mechanically, but he'll also be far better at playing the macro. I think this is what initialized point was with the one-on-one. I don't know if Ebby 2017 to 2020 is going to have a huge amount of improvement. Like, I mean, we saw in 2019 he did lose against the Shy in the 1v1 situation. He also lost against and he also lost against Uzi. And he also lost against Uzi, right? And it's like, well, okay, I guess when you're putting the bet, but how much of that is you go whatever, brush it off, and also go, well, he is probably the best Japanese player maybe that's ever existed currently. Yeah, and he's playing against some of the best Chinese talent. Is it just he is just so much further ahead of other Japanese talent, or
I think for the purposes of the theoretical argument, I don't want to get caught too much on Ebby, so we can take it as two minds. We can say either 2020 Ebby is ahead in multiple aspects, or we can say it's Ebby on both sides. Well, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So like if I was going to compare like 2020, go on.
So just to add a bit of context here as well, we're kind of assuming that this is on a patch where both teams have the same amount of time with the same amount of practice.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not like we're not like throwing 2017 Rampage into 2020's meta and assuming they're both going to be good at it, or
you just go DFM.
Or vice versa. Like exactly. So like we're assuming that actually all things are equal here. You've had the same amount of time with the same amount of prep to get to the point where you're at, rather than like throwing people into different metas and different patches.
Yep. Sure. And that's it at the end of the day.
And then I think the really interesting thing for me is the mid jungle 2v2 face off between these two teams. So as we talked about, current DFM's got.
Baby.
I had a lot of questions about them coming into this playoffs. I think they showed me up pretty well in the last two series. But like one thing which we've talked also a lot about on podcasts is how Sam has a lot of nostalgia for Ramune and Tussle.
This year is why it's so good.
This split, 2020 split, not been so good. But this was like high highs for this duo. So I'm gonna cede my authority over to you actually to judge who would win between these 2v2s. I mean I can have some input, but I'd love to know what you think about this jungle mid 2v2.
So it's worth pointing out that effectively Ramune, I believe, started in he was playing a little bit on some sort of like smaller rosters for a bit, but like 2017 was this huge breakthrough where he joined up with with the Rampage squad. Like, there was a little bit of time on Crest Gaming and stuff as well, but like this is when he really came forward and said, I am an absolute superstar. And him and Tussle just had the splits of their lives, and they were probably the best mid jungle 2v2 in the league. There's no doubt about it. They Seros and Steel were good, and they were competing with DFM. But remember, they came first place in the regular season in spring. They won
wasn't
spring.
Seros and Steel back then, remember?
Wouldn't be. Sorry,
Paz.
Paz
was actually jungle at that point.
That's exactly right. I apologize. That's right. So it would have been Seros and Paz eventually moved on to top lane. Thank you for the reminder. I'd forgotten where Steel went somewhere else for a bit, didn't he? And effectively in the regular season and in playoffs of both spring and summer, these guys were just the best 2v2 in the league. They were super aggressive. They had fantastic synergy. Ramone was winning his 1v1s and then would turn up with Tussle to all these other lanes. And that was where a lot of what Rampage was doing was really, really strong. And then when you also had Tussle with Ebby as a secondary place to be going, when you had Yutori Miyashi in the bot lane, like there were just so many other lanes where that 2v2 could turn up elsewhere and make a massive impact.
I think I'd have to agree with you, Sam. I think 2017 Rampage, because of how dominant they were, and because also what Ramone continued to go off and do afterwards, even on Pentagram, I think that just does show a very high level of play. And I think I'd agree with you. I think 2017 Rampage is probably a bit better in that duo. I think Ramone was also rivaling Syros very much so in the mid lane. Yeah. It's so weird because you have to push out the current 2020 what clusterfuck happened. You have to keep pushing out your brain and go, no, this is 2017 when they were really, really good.
Really, really good.
Yeah. And yeah, I think I agree with you. I think 2017 Rampage probably do have an edge in the matchup.
But the thing for me is, like, you know, I look at 2020 DFN that we've just seen, you know, I think that Blank Empyrean had a really good mid-jungle TV2 this split. And we saw in the finals, it just didn't matter. It didn't matter because the team found ways to play around this mid-TV2 of Seros and Steel and just, like, get to a point where their win condition was always fulfilled. It didn't matter what happened in that TV2.
But then they also had Ebby, and they also had the bot lane. They had Utapon and Gang, and like how much of that comes into other spots, right?
Yes. And that's why I'm like, well, mid jungle TV2 from Rampage. But 2020 DFM have Ebby, and they've got Utapon and Gang. It's the same problem that they're gonna have as Sengoku had this split. I think that Rampage, they were a good team, of course. They did go to Worlds and lose all their games in the play-ins. That was kind of sad. They went 0-4. That was a very sad time for the LJL. But like, I think in this particular matchup, you just can't discount the cohesiveness of DFM. It's not just mid-jungle TV2. This whole team works so well together.
I mean, but then Ramone was able to beat Syros in the 1v1 at this point. So
at least he was competitive, right? And like, there's also something to say for actually the way that specifically 2020 DFM play. It's not necessarily around the hyper aggressive mid 2v2 jungle 2v2. Actually, it's more around Seros with things like Heimerdinger Ziggs.
Give them late game objective control.
Yeah, and exactly, and like it's stable, and it's stable. Like the way Seros gets pressure in lane is actually around turret plates and stuff. It's the likes of his Ziggs and things, keeping people under turret and that kind of deal.
His teleports have been very good too.
Exactly, and it's exactly so it's how they end up elsewhere. Whereas Ramone and Tussle are hyper aggro in the mid lane, then they put that somewhere else.
I mean, it's very difficult. Let's move on to that bot lane duo that we also will have. And I mean, this is a very familiar name from our finals. We have Yutori Muashi under a different name at that time, if I remember rightly, but I'm not going to bother with that. But Yutori Muashi was the bot laner for Rampage. And then we actually have a player who's now retired, fully retired, and we had Dara, who... I mean, I'm looking just at their Leaguepedia page, and they did a lot of winning from it. Seems to be they came in, won a lot, and then retired. Now, that's what I'm getting.
In the LJL scene,
yeah.
So I mean, like I can throw some context in for Dara as well. We've not gone into this yet, but Dara was one of the guys who got stuck in a lot of the residency card passport scandals, and effectively he retired because he was so aggrieved and angry with the way it all played out. Like, we'll go into that a little bit later on, but basically Dara put out a fairly powerful tweet when he retired, saying like, "Look, I can't be involved in this scene anymore. It's making me sick." Effectively, with the way that certain people were still involved in the scene who were treated them poorly, and they'd basically been punished very lightly for it. So he was an excellent player who effectively retired, in part because of circumstances a little bit beyond his control, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some more into that. We will go into all of that drama another time, but that there is a story there.
So then,
that's okay.
Where do we compare against the current 2020 DFM of Yutapon and Gang, the bot lane duo that we thought were going to have the most difficult time with? Well, Yutori Muashi, and didn't seem to have a problem. What is the change between Yutori Muashi and Dara and this kind of combo lane that was in 2017 and comparing them to 2020 DFM, gentlemen?
I think Yutapon is such a big game player.
Yeah,
I think Yutori Muashi is to a certain degree too, but I think Yutapon is just like, looking at, particularly between last finals and this finals as well, and this split, this guy just steps up, given the bigger the plate, the bigger the... There's an analogy there. He does really well in big games. And we saw that this guy just took it to Yutori Muashi, and Yutori Muashi looked a bit phased in the finals this time around. And Yutori Muashi was on the winning side of that matchup in 2017. But I think that Yutapon has stepped up his game massively. And if we take them as like if we're taking his 2017 Yutori Muashi, I think that it's an absolute whitewash. I think Yutori Muashi right now is on the level of Yutapon. So I think the bot lane, if you do the theoretical of, you give some time to both players and they prepare well and whatever, I think it would be relatively even, because I think Gang is very good as well. We know so much about this guy in terms of his playmaking. His laning in the finals and the semifinals was absurdly good this split too. Very impressed by him. So I think that Dara, while he is, one of the all-stars of the LJL, Hall of Fame in terms of his performances and stuff, I would probably put Gang ahead of him now. This guy has done some magic in the support role.
I will also say the way that Yutori Muashi played, particularly in 2017, was he would basically
like Caitlyn.
Yeah, but it was pressure lanes where it wasn't about getting kills in the 2v2. It was about getting turret and CS, and that was his play pattern.
It was also 2017 as well, though. Remember that was super hard carry, 80 carries with Ardent Sensor farming up, like stuff like that.
And he was an absurd team fight carry, but it wasn't really about aggro 2v2s. Whereas I actually think that the play style of Yutapon and Gang is a lot more versatile. We've seen them play weak side. We've seen them play hyper aggro enchanter, like enchanter mage supports, where they kind of just push in really aggressive.
Always team fight well.
Yeah, they always team fight well, and we've seen them go for the kill lanes. Like we saw that in the finals as well, where they were going for we're going Nautilus, Aphelios, we're gonna blow you up under the tower. Get ready, boys. And I think that versatility for me, particularly in terms of how Gang has got a bit of a killer instinct, I would give it an edge to them.
So,
at least in this particular year's lineups.
With that said, has the LJL actually gotten better? And do we think DFM currently today beats the maybe best team the LJL has ever seen?
I think that DFM wiped the floor with them. I think, honestly, and I think I'll give you one big reason, which we've not even talked about yet. Heir, he's come into DFM, and this guy has revolutionized DFM in the way they can play multiple styles and not get shoehorned into a certain style of play between certain weeks of play. I think that DFM, honestly, would wipe the floor with last split's DFM. I think they've improved absolute leaps and bounds, so I don't see how Rampage could stand up to them, honestly.
Now,
that's my opinion.
Then the question becomes, for you, Initialize, then, has that been just the LJL as a whole has gotten better? Or do we just think that DFM are just naturally getting better because they have to? Or what else is happening in there in the back end?
So I think there's probably two things. One's a broader thing about the league scene in general, in that I think generally speaking, teams and regions largely have got better at playing the game. Not necessarily always on a mechanical level, not always, but at least in terms of an understanding of the game. I think generally people have got smarter about the game. And I think that ties into the second point, which is for a long time in the LJL, coaches didn't matter. This is something that specifically Maple Street has articulated really well a couple of times. I think there's some good Twitter posts from him, which you might have to go searching for if you wanted to look that up. But he has said for a long time that actually coaches have been a little irrelevant in the LJL. I think over the last year and a half, that is becoming significantly less true, and the coaches are having a way bigger impact. Look at the way V3 improved. Look at the way Sengoku Gaming improved. Look at the way DFM have improved. And I think a lot of that you can attribute to coaching staff and also players on those teams being willing to abide by coaching staff. Like, there's something to that, the likes of Blank Empyrean come from an SKT background where you can bet the likes of C Carter and Coma are going to be telling you what's going on. You can this is, I think that has probably helped the scene in the LJL, is that actually we've got better coaches in. People are willing to listen to those coaches too.
Cool. That's fair. Okay, well, the LJL's gotten better, people. Who would have known? Who would have known? It's not like we've been saying this for the last 16 episodes. So I mean, it kind of feeds in, but it is good to do that reflective part. I think it is important.
Look at some of the other squads in the past. We've had some fantastic rosters, and I think there is something too, looking back and saying, well, is it just that this year DFM just really good, but would they beaten by other rosters who because I mean, there's always that conversation back in NA. What about 2016 TSM? Has there been a roster that's beaten that? What about Liquid at their finest? Have we had some of those teams in the LJL? Rampage maybe stands up. But here are some arguments, I guess, about why that might.
I mean, until they have international performance, until an LJL team has international performance, like we've seen from, other emerging regions, there have been. Flash Wolves are that region. You can go really far back if you want to go Taipei Assassin. There have been emerging regions who have done very well at Worlds, and there always normally is one team. Exactly, right? Oh yeah, Gigamite Marines and everything.
5 back in the day.
Yeah.
That was different. That was open circuit. That was a little bit different.
But there at least have been emerging regions. Until the LJL have that, we can't really say that we've had that dominant team, right? Am I crazy in saying that?
Yeah, I agree, because obviously the only international stuff we had was Rift Rivals, which is against other emerging regions, so that's a little bit here and there, and also it's not. And
unless those emerging regions do really well and we weren't invited, then
exactly.
Yeah, and we had
also the motivation to play Rift Rivals was not high for a lot of teams. I think for the emerging regions it was higher, but you can't discount that. And also there's just bluntly not very much in the way of exposure and regular play between these teams, right? It'd be different if you had conferences, like the old Southeast Asian circuit, stuff like that, which Taipei Assassin had. When you had conferences within your region, you go to a bigger region, and then you'd have representatives from that going to Worlds and shit like that. So could I say a lot of these matchups about, oh, this team could play against this team? Yeah, sure, they'd win that because they won this thing in this year. That we don't really have those reference points besides a couple of MSI play-in stages, a couple of Worlds play-in stages. That's it.
I agree. I think that's the problem that we do have when we compare. Because if Rampage had done really well at Worlds, for instance, or at least gotten out of the group stage and then maybe done a decent run, then you can look at them and go, well, I mean, they did this and have DFM have got to match that. Have they ever done that? No, not really.
Yeah, I mean, they were also at that Rift Rivals event where LJL did well. Yes. They had probably the LJL's best performance in Worlds was in the play-in stage last year, where they did get to that kind of best of 5 match against Splice and took a game. Sure. That's the best we've done. Yeah. So
and until then, we can't think too much. Let's go on to our next team and next matchup. Who picked this one? Who picked this one? Was this Nymaera?
Yeah,
Nymaera, can you just bring your microphone up? You've gotten significantly quiet for no reason for me.
Might have been because I was talking away from the mic. I can turn it up a little bit as well, but yeah, hopefully that helps a bit. I'll just try and talk into the mic a bit more and try and I can sit or whatever. I'll just read. So the next matchup would be current CGA, Crest Gaming Act, 4th place finishers in Spring 2020 against 2018 Vitality. I put 2019 on the spreadsheet, but 2018 because I figured both these teams from very different regions, very different contexts in time as well, with crazy-ass mid laners and skirmishing across the board would be really fun to pit against each other. It would be a match I'd love to see if we could go back in time and do that. But also, I think it would give us a really good opportunity to benchmark one of our Dark Horse LJL teams against an established major region in the LEC. So I'd be interested to see where you guys think they would match up against them, and maybe in a larger kind of context, how would CGA do in the European circuit?
Sure. I mean, I think first off, let's run down the roster for that Team Vitality team. We all know CGA well enough, I assume, but I'm more than happy to do a quick rundown of CGA. Let me see. How much of this can I remember off the top of my head? So the second you want,
if you want it.
Oh, go for it then.
So is this for Vitality or for
Yes,
CGA?
Vitality.
Okay, so it would have been Cabochard in the top lane. It would have been Gilius. Sorry, it would have been Kikis at that point. Actually, I apologize. In the jungle, it'll have been Jizuke in the mid lane, and then Attila and Jack Troll as the bot lane.
Okay, and you know CJ well enough. Nap in the top lane, Yoshi in the jungle, Arya in the mid lane, and then we have Gango in the bot lane with Grendel as their support.
Yeah. So first things first, mid lane is of course the thing which all eyes are drawn to. I think there's a lot of overlap in champion pool here. You know, Echo, LeBlanc, some other stuff there. I think Jizuke probably has a wider champion pool than Arya in some regards, but both of them are really strong in lane, really strong in skirmishes. And the question is, who do you think would win out of these two guys? Because they're both quite established players at this point.
Well, one slightly more established than the other, right?
True.
So
Yeah.
I sadly have to give it to the EU to that one because
EU mids, man.
yeah,
EU mids.
I mean, and like, well, one, EU mids are apparently the only alternative to Korean mids, apparently, and the other thing is, well, I mean, granted though, Arya is Korean, so like, how?
Yeah.
But I mean, until Arya plays in a really big region, while he might be the current god of the LJL mid lane, while beating Pyrion and Syros is pretty impressive, how much more does that push me to think? I mean, I think Arya could win, but Jizuke has done good at Worlds.
Remember
right?
that.
So
So this 2018 Vitality roster, this is the one which took games off of Genji in the group stages and knocked Korean stage out in group stages. That is absurd in its own right. They fell out third in that group stage in Group B of the main stage of 2018 Worlds, but they had that, you know, that speech from Yamato Cannon about, you know, playing your own style, not just conforming, playing your own thing. And in talking about conforming, I think that CJ have not been a team to conform. They have always just done their own thing. Maybe not to the extent that Rascal Jester does, but particularly in Gango and Arya, they've just always just kind of done what suited them. And for the early parts of the split, you really saw that payoff. And again, kind of towards the end of it, they turned it back on again. They had a bit of an awkward mid-split, but that's how I'd classify them. They just played to their characteristics.
Yeah. So I think for me, where the difference lies, actually, I think Jizuke and Arya would be relatively even-ish in lane. I think Arya's experienced enough at this point that wouldn't be such a big deal. And this is a guy who's top 100 in Korean Challenger, having played from the ping in Japan at the minute. Like, this guy's
He's
really,
got over
really
1,000 LP right now, yeah.
He's really, really good. Like, genuinely a fantastic talent. So I don't necessarily expect Jizuke or him to be completely outclassed in lane. I would potentially give Arya a touch of an advantage in a skirmish, just because I think of the champions and stuff he plays, the things like the Silas and the likes, I just really buy into that. Whereas let's think about Jizuke and what he does so damn well and did so damn well at that Worlds. It was the echoes and the rises in a side lane where he would just pull off these ridiculous split pushes, draw all these people to him and get out. Like, that difference there is where I see a big shift.
Yeah, no, I agree. But like, I mean, he can play Orianna for the team fights. He was playing Galio, Azir, Zoe, Malzahar, Kassadin. Like, this guy's champion pool is basically, does it exist? Yeah, all right, I can probably do it.
What was he famous for in terms of his play?
I would say, like, if I was going to, like, say Arya and a couple of picks, it's Zoe, LeBlanc, and Silas. I'd say those three. If I was going to do it for Jizuke, I'd say Echo, LeBlanc, Rise. Those are the three I'd say. And they do, obviously there's some overlap there, but particularly with the Rise, it gives them, I think Jizuke on that Vitality roster had such a way of making it to the late game and making things weird. The thing about CJ is that if you were going to play that way, CJ sometimes force just the strangest fights and then end up taking that opportunity away from you because you're trying to fit into this accepted pattern of the game and it just doesn't happen because teams just aren't fighting the way you assume they will.
Can I add in one other potential thing? I think the actual big difference for me, ironically, won't be that mid lane, despite those two superstars. I worry mostly for Nap. I think Nap's a solid player who plays things like the Cho'Gath really, really well. Cabochard is that guy who demands attention from his jungler. This is something that go look back to Diamond Prox's interviews talking about the guy in 2015 when he was
he played on Gambit.
They played on Gambit way back when. That's when he made his really big break in the scene, was playing on Gambit. And the idea is that Cabochard was like playing with Crepo and solo queue, where he's like, yeah, I'm going to play teleport Lee Sin in the top lane, and I will just hard outplay you, teleport and hard outplay. And I worry for Nap when a guy like Cabochard is given a lane where he gets to be free and can push in really hard, I could see trouble for Nap there.
Sure, and I think similarly in the jungle, Yoshi might get a little bit ran around by Kickers. He was very good at pathing, very good at controlling the early game, and Yoshi's been very hit and miss with that. And I think that in a matchup like this, where things go
Miss won't be good enough.
I mean,
0 to 100 real quick.
I really do agree with you both on that, because think about it, Cabochard was able to kind of keep up with Wonder back in 2018.
He was the best top player in
right? But for the All-Pro team, Wonder was the one that went off. Right, so like that's the kind of crazy level of play. I have to agree with you. I'm worried for Nap, but then you have the complete opposite side of that map. I'm not worried for the carry of CGA. I'm worried about Grendel, because we saw Grendel as maybe the weakest player on the team getting caught out, especially on that Nautilus. Right, that it's something that raises, and I don't think we're gonna have that problem with Jack Troll.
Because I think Jack Troll also does similar things to Grendel.
Yeah, probably they do very similar things.
They're very similar things. And I think that potentially even Jack Troll in this current split has been worse at that. Back then, I think Jack Troll actually had very consistent split and all this other stuff.
Exactly.
I think that you've got two hyper-aggressive AD carries. Again, the more I think about this matchup, the more about, actually, honestly, CGA might kind of be, outside of Yoshi, at the top side of the map, but mid and bot, very similar towards Vitality. Which is why I thought it'd be interesting to talk through this and whether we think, even given 2 years, is this team capable of taking down, the European third seed of 2018?
So, I mean, I will say I think I would give an edge to Gango over Attila. Well, I think Attila was one of those guys.
He had some
moments. Like he was a Draven player, right? I think a little bit occasionally.
So is Gango.
So is Gango, right? But they did occasionally run these kill lanes and run over things. But actually, when games went even, Attila would often drop a lot of CS, that kind of deal. And I actually think someone like Gango, if he gets his hands on a Draven and can run at this guy's like, there is a chance when those 2v2s are going to be a little bit aggro, that CJ actually come out on top of this. Maybe.
I mean, I'm sad that I can't go with the Japanese team. I've got to go with the European, but I just can't see Vitality 2018 Vitality dropping that. This is when they did a deep.
At their best.
Yeah, this was when they were at their absolute best. 3 of the members were on the second All-Pro team of Jack Troll, Kickus, and Cabochard. Like, this team was like popping off, and like, what was their competition? 2018 Fnatic, 2018 G2, and they still came second in the Standard Spring split. Like, this is how insane they were. The only team they couldn't beat was Fnatic, and that was by 1 game.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is that actually Vitality were also a massive coin flip team. Even when it came to Worlds, they did kind of run it down in a couple of scenarios.
Yes, they did.
The thing is, actually, what I was talking about? Well,
but they get that.
Run around Yoshi in the early game. There were a couple of times where Vitality just ran it down and they just couldn't do anything to recover the game. And I think that CGA playing with a gold lead are really hard to beat. So I think, I would probably give the edge to Vitality. I'd probably beat them 7-8 times out of 10, but there are still 2-3 games where CGA would probably just run away with it with their individual carries.
I think it would definitely be, some of those team fights would be so hard for you to cast initialize. Your voice gone.
I want to think about it at the same time. I'm a little bit nervous thinking about it.
Nymaera, you don't get to talk for that.
No, I don't. I get to go look at the pretty explosion.
You go, wow! I'm looking forward to the analyst desk after this, so I can talk.
Right, kind of.
I mean, that's probably the reason why we brought this up, right? Is that while I think it's fair to say Vitality, particularly in that Worlds run where they did turn it around, they could absolutely have taken CGA to pieces potentially. There is also that other world where that speech doesn't play out and Vitality continue to look pretty mediocre and fall apart. And that's why this conversation is so interesting, because CGA are so similar in
that's current Vitality.
Current Vitality. Yeah, that's why I thought. Current Vitality are quite similar to CGA, and of course CGA might fall off a cliff in a similar regard, right? That could definitely happen. So I mean, as much as kind of like this matchup is fascinating, I think we talked through each of the individual roles. I kind of wanted to lead this into a larger discussion about, well, okay, so we talked about CGA and this kind of some of the messier side of the EU side of this. So if we took CGA from this split and took them into the LEC this split, just an extras team, looking at the teams this split, where do you reckon they'd place? Because there are 10 teams in, so 10 teams in the LEC. Where do you reckon they'd place? So I've got the standings up here.
Okay.
So let me just say, they're not beating G2. They're not beating Fnatic.
No.
They're probably not beating Origin or Mad Lions. There's a whole host of teams in here. I'm like, that'd be tough.
Well, Mad
don't
or
think they'd
Origin
be
are the
awful.
only. I think Mad or Origin on a really good day they might be able to, right? But like, because I mean, Mad Lions did lose 7 games. There is a. We're saying there's a chance there. Origin are definitely the one I'm. Well, actually, no, they tied with Fnatic yet. They're not being Origin.
I think depending on how well the likes of Aria translated to EU, I could see them challenging for 6th, maybe 5th.
I
maybe.
genuinely think they could be a playoff contender in
Yeah.
LEC. And also remember that, you know, if they played a whole split there, I think the level of performance would have upped their game as well.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, obviously the LEC is a stronger league than the LJL. I think there's no debate
I
there.
don't know if they beat XL consistently.
I think they might go 1-1.
That's the reason it's so hard.
I think
'Cause
they go 1-1.
I could see them going anywhere between 5 and 8.
Well, I could see them also being lower. I could also just I mean, that's one of these things, and this is why we've been asking for more games to be played international. Obviously, pandemic happens, so that can't happen, regardless in our wildest dreams of everything else. But like, that's why it's so difficult, because it'd be cool to see some of the Japanese teams play European teams and NA teams and just other regions in general, really. I don't know if SK. I think current
They would beat.
Yeah, they beat Team Vitality. That's not a problem. That's not a concern. It's just, do they beat SK consistently? Do
From
CGA?
this split, probably.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, from this split. 'Cause SK had a lot of issues. And I think the one thing you can always say about CGA, they are proactive. They have playmakers and they will do that. Unlike a team where like
Shout like very unproactive for a while.
like,
they got
you know,
better
like-
at it towards the end of the split. But
yeah, you know, some teams which have really fallen off the cliff in terms of you know, like Origin at their worst, stuff like that. The argument put against them is, they did nothing and they lost. Of course, TSM say that a lot about their team as well and shit like that. CGA have never been the team to do nothing and lose. They do something and it fails horribly at the very least.
Yeah, that's why we've seen them have some very quick games in the opposite end, right?
Yeah.
Like, because
But I think that's definitely something to be honed. You know, you can take that playmaking and at least kind of shave off the rough edges and get into something feasible. So I don't think they'd be stone dead last in EU. I think I reckon they could playoff contend. I think that would be an option for them.
So my only concern with them not kind of making playoffs is sometimes they're fully leaning on Aria to full carry those games. And I think the best example of when it didn't work is that Rascal Jester's game, when it just went all to
man.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's where I'm like, the teams will. Well, I mean, drafting doesn't actually matter when it just comes to that. The EU teams are going to just be, in my eyes, more familiar with shutting down one player. If there's one person that might be able to carry a game, I think XL, Rogue, and Misfits.
But I raise you the example of Misfits playing largely around Featherman in this split. You know, they were very much in the Featherman basket, and the games they were losing, it was literally Featherman versus the world a lot of the time, it felt like. And of course, they lost a lot of those games, so maybe you can say it is actually a consequence of Featherman is the one carry, maybe they're shutting that down. But it's, you know, I mean, like a lot of these teams have got, you know, almost, so Misfits 10-8, you know, it's a 56% win rate. They're going 1-1 with most of the teams in the league. I reckon CGA playing a similar style could coin flip their way to playoffs.
Yeah. I think it's the moment you hit a best of 5, it's a very different scenario. But I do think in a regular season, I could kind of see where Nymaera is.
But then we have the problem with, like, do we think, okay, so Misfits, so we have Feathervin, but then we go, okay, well, do we think Nap beats Dan? I'm sorry, I don't think that happens.
Pretty good, that's true. Dan has Dan.
And then I'm like, and then you go, do you think Kobe wins? Or, like, come on, no one, it's not beating Kobe.
So you've got to remember, at this point, though, it's B-Boy, who I actually think would be in a little bit of an easier lane, potentially, that might have been a bit safer for the likes of Grendel.
I don't know, that bot lane duo is just something that I have questions about.
We all do.
Granted, I think they could beat Rogue. So
I think Rogue occasionally has some really good games too, and of course they made.
But they were so back and forth. I mean, the problem is they got it's Handsammer and Vander.
They're their 1-on-1 team in every day. Remember, Rogue went 9-9, and we're just like, fuck it, boys, consistent, and we'll make playoffs, which is kind of what CGA rather actually did. So for a fair point, until they actually figured it out towards the end, and then actually got some wins onto their belt consistently.
And because we've spent so much time waffling about EU stuff, you can understand why I chose this matchup. Because I'm like, actually, you know, EU is a very strong league. It is. The LEC is genuinely very strong.
Very good.
CGA are not crap. you know, like they made it fourth into our playoffs and whatever. They did all right. They did pretty well, and they had some great plays. So I thought it'd be really interesting to say. Let's be honest, I could have compared them to an NA team and said, "Oh, NA's awful," or whatever. I just meme about it.
They'll come second. They'll just lose to C9.
Yeah, this is a genuinely interesting conversation about, well, okay, CGA, one of our dark horses in the LJL. You put them into an established league. How about it? How would it happen? I think anything more on this particular match?
I think we've said most stuff there. We're in danger of going too far at this point, so I think most of the stuff there. Unless Lexie, you look like you might have something to say there.
No, I think I do think making playoffs is a very difficult thing.
I agree.
I think if they make it, they're basically taking Rogue out of that spot, and that's a difficult feat to do because that's a 50% win rate, and that's not an easy thing to do in EU, let alone any other region. But they were able to do that in the LJL. Oh, to do that above that in the LJL. Well, actually, no, they weren't able to do that in the LJL. They didn't even make it. They had a 36 win percentage, basically bombed out hard, had to beat Burning Core, and then they had their good run. But remember, Axis did better than them in the regular spring split, so... Aria versus the world, boys! Aria versus the world! But with that all said, I think let's go on to our one that some of our sister region, our older sister region, arguably, more than anything else. She is our older sister. The VCS. We're going to be covering a former player of that sort of region. Old region-esque team. Sort of, kind of. It's weird how things broke up recently over the last few years.
XLMS, strictly.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a point when VCS is part of that. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, it's hard to fucking do all of that. But we're going to be doing V3 Esports, current day V3 Esports, facing off against current day GAM or Gigabyte Marines. I don't really know how to do this. I kind of want to just throw it over to you guys and then you guys start figuring this shit out because I don't know how to talk about this subject because, that's a sore spot for the VCS when it comes to Gigabyte Marines not winning.
This is the whole thing, right? So again, we kind of jotted this one down between us and thought, does Gigabyte Marines losing their finals 3-2 to Flash affect our view of them, or is it just Flash is good and Gigabyte Marines weren't quite?
I mean, that last game was
so good.
That series was so good.
Yeah, and I look at kind of this Gigabyte Marines roster. I'm like, that's a good player. I move down the roster and I go, that's a good player. And I do that pretty much throughout the entire roster. Let me just get the.
So I've got them here. If you want me to read them out for you.
Yeah, go for it. So this will be This will be.
So the active player, the active player roster is of course Kiaya in the top lane. And we got Levy of international fame in the jungle. It's Dio1 in the mid lane. It's Blazes as a bot laner. And they've also got a couple other players in there who are quite famous, who I don't know how much they got a chance to play, but it's like Easy Love, and of course No Way is a very famous bot laner. Yeah. So that's all on the roster somewhere or another, and Slay is their support, another very famous.
No, Pallet for support.
Is it Pallet? I've got active roster here as...
yeah, well, they've had some roster changes.
That's what it is. Okay, thank you. That's what it was. Yeah.
Kiaya and Zeros sharing the top lane. Levi, Dio1, Blazers, and Pallet.
Okay, that's what it was. Because I mean, like Slay here it was the okay to enjoy. Wait, okay, never mind. It doesn't matter.
And you all know V3 well enough, but just in case, we have Paz in that top lane, Boogie, that crossover I was mentioning earlier poorly. We have Ace in that mid lane, Archer as their carry, and Reina as the support. Gentlemen, this is a difficult comparison outside of I think the jungle for V3 is better, but outside of that, I'm not quite sure about it because I'm not quite sure if Ace is better than the other.
Dio1 is a monster.
Exactly, right? But then it's Levi in the jungle, so I'm like not sure.
So I'm kind of here, like, I mean, so we had a bit of a chat. We might revisit in a future podcast idea at some point about if we were going to disband the LJL and send each of our teams over to the region we think they either fit best into or would do the best in.
We get to control.
I would send V3 probably to the VCS. They play like that. They love diving. The only thing they do is dive. They had Echo Nocturne as a mid lane jungle duo for the longest time, and that was their speciality. Boogie has really rocked our world in the LJL. He's been such a delight to watch this split. But, you know, the VCS is where these crazy junglers come from. We've had Levy, we've had Meliodas, who have kind of come onto the international stage and done some crazy things. Boogie, of course, with the Flash Wolves last year, had a fantastic international debut, did a lot of cool stuff on that stage. Do I think he would out and out beat Levi? No, I don't. I think he might have the edge, and I think that both of them are ridiculously good Graves players and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Amazing.
But for once, I think actually V3 would have to play without the jungle advantage, and I'm not sure how that would affect the team.
Big time. I mean, like, I would also say...
We've seen when that doesn't happen.
Right. I mean, I will also throw in that Zeros was also a kind of rotating top laner. He's just retired.
Yeah, I did.
So it wasn't on the episode. Sorry, I missed that. That's my bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, continue.
I mean,
sure.
I think one really interesting thing is when we've seen V3 not have that, and I think some of the best ones is actually that Sengoku. I think whenever they play against Sengoku, I don't think they beat Sengoku at all this split. I think they went 0-2 against Sengoku, if I remember things rightly. And I mean...
Yeah, they might have done, actually.
I think they did. And the reason for that is I think that you don't get Pryho versus Blank. This is a supporting world's winner. This is a guy who can play on the best team in the world, and if you give him an opportunity, he can step up to it. You can't see that happening when you're, even if you've got the best jungler in the region, the second best jungler, if we're calling Blank the second best jungler. I mean,
still,
yeah, right? Like, it's hard. It's hard to put yourself on that highest level. Like, DFM were also not good games for V3. Like,
well, V3, of course, they fell down in the semifinals after some weird stuff with the patch changes and all the other stuff. They went 1-1 in the regular season, beat them very handily in their second match.
They did.
We talk about that being a weird draft amongst other things. So basically, this matchup for me is that, okay, right, we're putting V3 into a region which arguably they're quite similar to. Dire 1 ran over the mid lane this split.
He was so good, man.
I believe he was the regular season MVP as well from the unofficial, the VCS English guys. But honestly, the matchups which are interesting, of course, don't stop there. I think that particularly the support matchup is actually really big for me. Reina has enabled V3 to play aggressively pretty much the whole split. Thrash Lanterns, Taumkench Devours having defensive or like peeling depth charge and hooks as well from Nautilus and stuff. Reina has done an absolute lion's share of the peeling duty for V3, and he's done it with aplomb. Palette is the shot caller in a lot of ways from GAM, as far as I'm led to believe, though. This guy brings a cerebral level of play, and he's just very good in lane and skirmishes. So I don't even think that they have the support advantage in a lot of ways, too. So I look at this and I kind of go, V3, wow, you're pretty similar. In a best of 5, I might give it 3-1, 3-2 or something, but this is a bit of a weird matchup for them.
Yeah. And like, I will say I think Paz is pretty good, and I think we have seen some strength from that. But it's really interesting because we have talked, of course, on the LJ a lot about how V3 are probably the most VCS-esque team we have. And part of why they have found so much success, I think, as Nymaera just articulated really well, is that they...
Jungle diff?
Well, it's not just jungle diff, but it's also their playstyle is just quite new to the LJL, and people don't know how to play against it as much at the minute. They won't have that advantage in the VCS where everyone does it.
True.
And I think that then becomes a question, is like, how do you take your own medicine? And I don't know. The thing is, I actually think Reina and Archer would have a good lane. I think they could play really well down there. Like, they're good players. I actually think that Levy versus, gosh, I can do this now, Boogie would be an awesome matchup. I think the top lane, actually, I think Paz is a very good top laner when he's on the right things. All of that is good. The problem is this mid lane discrepancy. Dire 1 is very good and plays the style that V3 do, but probably better.
I do think that Archer is maybe ahead of Blazers. I mean, I can quote from the last stream the VCS guy said, as long as the top three players of like the top side of the map stay there for GAM, they'll always be a title contender. It's not about the bot lane, really. And I think that Archer and Reina, if we're talking about diving all the time from both sides, we have seen Archer and Reina outplay so many dives.
Oh yeah,
they love doing
game
that.
2.
Half
Fortune thresh to the mid lane turret.
Half of me wonders if they just outplay dives and win the game through that.
Okay, I think that's an interesting thing. I mean, something that I forgot that they're doing for the mid-season streamathon is there's going to be that mid-season showdown versus the PCS facing off against the VCS.
Yeah.
I mean, we're getting the top 2 teams of both regions playing off against that, and GAM are going to be one of them, right?
Yes.
So exactly, right? So it's like we're going to get to see 2 emerging regions face off against each other. Do we think these V3 would be able to contend with these 4 teams? And I think, yeah, on a good day for V3, I think they actually could probably get there. Now, did they actually get there in the actual spring playoffs?
No, we wouldn't be able to send them.
No.
Top 2 would not be V3.
They would not be V3. So then we have to put some equity into that DFM and Sengoku, how it ran out, are strictly better teams. They weren't far off, but they didn't run the gauntlet.
I figured the closest matchup would actually be GAM versus V3. That's not why I put down, oh, how would like Sengoku do versus GAM? I actually reckon Sengoku would do better than V3 versus the VCS in a lot of ways. They love controlling their opponents.
Yeah, well, that and DFM, yeah.
And you said like obviously V3 went 0-2 versus Sengoku, and Sengoku like just blasted through to the finals, lost there of course, but
DFM in playoffs, yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that. But no, I think it'd be a really interesting matchup, and I think that particularly Archer might have a really good time in the series.
Yeah. Ooh, he could also go like 0-6. We have also seen that happen.
He could run it down.
Like, put it out there. Like we have also seen when sometimes their aggression bites them in the ass when the likes of say a Utah and a gang turn it around on them. Yes. Go look at that because obviously you're saying like do they outplay dives? Yes, they do. Game 1 DFM versus V3, we saw actually they played that pretty well for 30 minutes of that game, outplaying a lot of dives. Games. What? The other games they lost, what was it? Games 2, 3, and 4?
Yes.
I think which ones they lost. I can't remember which ones. Well, must be 2.
They lost game 1, 3, 4. They won game 2.
Yeah, so yes, that's what it is. It's game 1, 3, 4.
The Graves. No,
that's right. That's right. Yeah, thank you. So we know Archer can do it. We can also see that sometimes they trust a little bit too much in outplaying and end up getting slapped. And DFM dive, but I don't think they dive on the same level of dive in all caps with 3 exclamation marks at the end of it. The way
what does it say? It's even. No, that's dive upside down. Oh, cool, nice. It still says dive.
But it's a 50-50. It's a coin flip still. Okay, whatever. Forget about that. I think it's really interesting. I think it will kind of come down to champ selection. Obviously, someone like Levy has I don't know how to pronounce some of these names.
It's Levi.
Has huge champion pools, right? So but then we've seen Boogie was just randomly picking random stuff. So
yeah.
I mean, it's gonna be interesting, I would say the least, especially with an AP Shyvana backup pick that didn't...
The Echo Jungle backup pick.
Echo Jungle backup pick. I mean, there's options, right? I think it would definitely be an exciting matchup. I do think Sengoku would beat Gigabyte Marines, which is kind of crazy because that's the VCS's top team. And I'm like...
yeah, I know it's really controversial to leave it there and not discuss it, but we got other stuff.
We got... Yeah. We've got stuff. We've also already hit an hour on recording on our podcast, so
okay, move it on.
How much?
Move it on.
Yeah, exactly. How much more we're going to talk about some stuff is going to be interesting. Potentially, our last topic won't be covered much now, but we have actually got a topic about Sengoku. And that was a topic that was brought up on Twitter. I think Nymaera can give a bit more context to this whole thing. So I'm going to pass it over to him to kind of give a little bit more context in regards to why he had a response to someone talking about the minor regions, Sengoku, and how successful were they during this split? Is second good enough?
Okay, so basically a thought cropped up on Twitter from a guy that does do a lot of LJL coverage on Reddit. And
right?
It's Joshi, yes.
Joshi, yeah, Josh. Yeah, he does academy coverage. And he's the LJL man on Reddit, is in his Twitter bio.
So Glowworth, one of the lovely people in and amongst our community, and also works very hard for stuff like the LCL and a lot of the emerging regions on Leaguepedia, tagged me into this thing about where Joshi was talking about, did Sengoku have a successful split? They revamped almost their entire roster. They came back and they were looking for very much high results. Has this split or has this iteration of Sengoku been a success? Discuss.
I mean,
So I'm going to hand over to you guys first, just to have initial kind of preliminary thoughts, because I am of multiple opinions on this, actually.
I mean, you could look at it and say, no, they didn't win. Right?
Look at it.
You could look at it like that. They did not have the dominant performance that this team could have had. This is two former SKT players, arguably maybe the best individual Japanese AD carry outside of one that you're basically not going to be able to pinch. So, like, if you basically go, there's one team you're not going to be able to pinch any players from, but basically the rest of the rosters are free for me to grab. I think they got basically the best that they could get, and they didn't win. And they didn't win. So is that successful? It's 50-50, right? It's 50-50, right? I kind of go, yes, they got second, but that's not the W.
Sure.
Initialize.
Okay. So here's the question, right? There's a few ways of doing this. What does it mean to be successful? And what is a price you're willing to pay for that? And is actual profit a margin, a way of rating success? And arguably, yes. I mean, Travis Gafford put out relatively recently a sort of article or a podcast basically going through the sort of price paid to money earned success rate.
I always find that so interesting, watching that video. I always love it.
And for a long time, C9 were really high on that. They've dropped down to like 4th or 5th, having won this one because they paid big bucks for the likes of Vulcan. They paid big bucks for the likes of Sven. Like, but actually, they did all right with that. Liquid, despite coming first for years and years and years, were at the absolute bottom of the list because of how much damn money they were spending for that success.
Yeah, and they were.
So like, there is that always question, and like, let's have a look at Sengoku Gaming, and like, specifically the likes of Pyrian and Blank are going to be worth big dollars. You are then adding in the likes of Yutori Mashi, who is arguably the best AD carry in the region. Like, that is already 3 huge names you're paying good money for.
And it's not like NTN are no names either, right?
Exactly. No. So and I can't comment on their
but we know,
on the actual, how much they're actually paying.
I mean, the thing is, emerging regions always get paid significantly less. They're not on LCS salaries, they're not on EU salaries. They are emerging regions, so they are significantly lower.
But you know what else will be significantly lower? The prize pool. And second place prize pool, when that comes down relatively, that's going to be a problem. And I don't think they'll have broken even with the roster they've got. So on that metric, at least, I have some issues.
Yeah. So effectively, what I replied to at the start of this Twitter kind of thing was that, well, I'm not sure this is the time frame to discuss the success of this roster. This is a new roster after one split. How many rosters have you really seen gel out on that kind of time frame?
Very few.
Not a great deal. I mean, GT, right? There are some crazy ones out there where you've got brought together the Infinity Stones.
Fnatic has done that countless times.
Yeah,
so
C9
has done it before. Remember?
Like Fnatic Season 5, I'd say. Yeah, for sure.
C9, when they had their breakout year, they just won back-to-back.
Sure, yeah, and there are a couple out there, but like
SKT,
they're very much in the minority. Think about the amount of teams where they've just faded into obscurity because the rosters just hadn't done anything, right? What about Fnatic Season 6 when they rebuilt again? What about when Rainover and Hoodie went over to NA and then they got on walls? That was really good. And then split them up and blah blah blah, whatever. And we've had plenty of teams come and go when they've tried to rebuild a roster. Sengoku come in, they beat DFM in a best of 5, and if the objective was show that we can beat DFM, that is definitely a point towards their success. They lost in the finals, actually, as well, 3-1, and it was a convincing defeat. It was. They looked competitive, but it was not. They were by far the second best team on the day.
But then we've already given our thoughts on patch change and everything else, how we think that's bullshit, frankly.
Arguably, you could say that they were winners in anything but name because of the patch change and all this other stuff. I'm not going to be assaulted.
There's a bit of saltiness on that one, but
there is a viewpoint to be taken. Actually, the competition was vastly altered by the patch change and stuff like this. The big thing for me, MSI isn't happening, which means that if your goal and your measurement for success, your yardstick is saying represent Japan at an international competition, do well or whatever, and at least pick up some wins in your playing stage, win. It wouldn't have mattered the split anyway.
Well,
so
due to how circumstances played out.
Exactly, and that is the circumstances we're dealing with. Sengoku would not have been able to go to MSI.
But that wouldn't have been the circumstances they would have begun this roster with.
No. Exactly. Which is why this is somewhat fortuitous, because I think they've shown that they can contend for that title spot. I think, they've taken wins and a series off of DFM.
Sure.
Is it worth the price tag that they've got, including, for all the players they brought in? I am not privy to the payrolls. I am not aware of all that stuff. I think that they've definitely put themselves on the map. What I will say is second was bare minimum. You cannot come lower than second with this roster to.
Well, I think you could have come third if the Hawks had actually performed up to their expectations that were very, 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 very high. I think
if you look for the Hawks, you've shown that you're the second best roster rebuild.
I think
that's a failure.
I think my point has been mistranslated by you, Alex. So what my point was, and I think initially I saw it, was we bigged up the Hawks to basically be potentially the people that could make DFM fall, right?
Yeah.
They turned into an absolute train wreck, right? If the Hawks had basically been the other Sengoku, I think it would have been totally fine, because then potentially, if you have arguably the Hawks and Sengoku both trying to take down DFM, there's a way better chance that one of them do it, and then as overall it's a thing. Sengoku basically had to do that all on their own, and you could argue that yes, as you said, second is only acceptable, but I think that you have to put a caveat in there.
Yeah,
I think you can definitely say that Hawks were looking for that similar kind of result, but I think that if Sengoku were to have lost to the Hawks and come third in that, I think
that would have been more of a failure. Yeah,
because they would have lost to another rebuild team and shown that
they rebuilt worse.
They're not even a rebuilt team this.
But then you also, we're talking about a hypothetical here where basically coming into the third round of the play-ins, you could have not had V3. It could have been the Hawks or Sengoku who ran up to the gauntlet. And then if we run on the same idea that Sengoku are the team that beat DFM, we then get to see the Hawks try and beat DFM, and then we also try and get to see Sengoku beat DFM for a second time round. There's a far better chance that one of those teams actually beat DFM, and then DFM either comes second or they come third. But then that's the whole month-long break and everything else. So.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like I get you. I totally do. I mean, the problem is the aim of Sengoku, though, I guess, is like it's not to have another organization do what they want to do. They want to do it themselves.
That's the thing, right? If you put it in the context, I mean, sure, if the Hawks had played up to our expectations of them, and they had
what a world that would have been.
Like, I mean, we can reason with that as analysts and kind of say, okay, well, yeah, the Hawks came out with this roster and whatever, but I think there is a level between, Tussle and Ramune in terms of paychecks and international recognition, and Pyrian and Blank and rebuilding that roster, and Yusugamashi, paycheck and all this other stuff, right? Let's be honest, Blank and Pyrian probably could have gone for LPL money and shit. Well, maybe not Pyrian because he had a really bad year on SK. But there's
I don't think any of these players would have, if they could have gone to those. I think if they could have stayed LCK, they probably would have. They probably couldn't because they weren't getting the money. So Sengoku was their best alternative. So I think you have to look at it and go, this is a team who was fortuitous to get these players. They were very fortunate to get them and to lock them in for a year contract, and they've got them both. They've got Blank and Pyrian until the end of this split. So I think the way end of summer split rather, and end of worlds and everything. So I think you have to be very happy. But then, as we all know, there is the future Korean exodus where it's the reverse to it for it happening. Everyone's returning back. It's the
prodigal sons.
Yes, they're all going to be returning. The LCK and the Challenger region is going to get far more competitive. And there's, the idea that there's ever going to be anyone that's not Korean playing in Korea is almost probably not going to happen outside of coaching staff.
Yep. Well, Forgiven was offered a chance for a free kick.
So was Double Lift.
But how likely is that ever going to happen now?
No, that's a 1 in a million, really.
Exactly.
But no, I think we're going to go back to the whole kind of question of, has Sengoku had a successful split? We're talking about the theoretical. I think if they'd come third, you cannot call it a success as a split, because this roster was very much put together to be a title.
But then you're arguing the point that you were trying to go totally against.
Was I? In what
you were saying the whole idea that that even discussing this is kind of a bit forward.
I agree.
So
I think that if you,
me saying third is just like you're actually playing into my argument.
I think that you need to make a very serious attempt in summer. I think that if they fail to win in summer, given the amount sunk into this, I'm wondering if they don't get first in summer, if this is a failure. That's what I'm wondering. In worst case scenario, and if you look at them as Sengoku, the amount they've put into this, if they don't represent Japan at Worlds, is this a failure? I think there's a good chance that it is. So I think for me, we have to wait until summer, which of course is delaying the question. I think for spring, it's a proof of concept at the very least. I think if they'd done awful this split, you can always recover it with a good summer.
But
you
But it
want to
doesn't.
have
But it's a
that-
really bad
you want
sign.
to have that assurity, right? You want that security there where you can kind of say, okay, right, we can build on this. If they'd done what the Hawks had done this split, I don't know whether the alarm bells are going off in some corporate headquarters somewhere already.
I mean, the Hawks are already having bells ringing, and we're already hearing things, and we only hear very little, right? So that's concerning. If we're already hearing things and seeing things, we're like, oh god, the Hawks definitely are on a fire at the moment. Sengoku, though, I mean, to counteract your points, they never really went on a super long hot streak of wins and as opposed to losses. They kind of had a few and then lost one, and then had a few and then lost one. They went 9-5, which is fine, but it's not DFM 12-2. And they were one away of also, remember, they could have almost lost their second place spot if they went 0-2 in the last week, and V3 could have taken that from them. They were borderline just securing that. Now, beating DFM in that playoffs definitely puts a lot more weight onto it. And then V3 losing that. But again, we have to put that in a weird place because that was a month-long break, and that whole happens into it, and that God, I hate that month-long break.
Joshi kind of in one of the replies basically said, yeah, second feels like getting a C, which I guess is technically passing.
But that's kind of what I wanted to go on to, because I kind of agree, because like because there's also there is succeeding, and then by what degree have you succeeded, and also how narrow is the margin for failure? Because like second is like on that borderline we're kind of discussing in some ways. You know, like actually, would third have been enough, even if it is the first split? You can kind of forgive second, but like because it's almost first and it's first split. If they end up coming into summer and doing second again, we'll get third. If V3 step or the Hawks turn it around, they help.
Or anybody else.
Or maybe
Fuck's sake, Axis win! I'd be fucking phenomenal about that.
But if
we're all buying that t-shirt.
If they get second again, that's hitting C-D territories. Like if they have paid the money to be the Japanese representatives, then like close in spring is one thing. You know, close with proof of concept, beating a best of 5 is one thing. Not doing it in summer is another, and that's a terrifying thing.
Let me raise you this question. This is a hypothetical. If we had a tournament like Rift Rivals or a PCS versus VCS, where you had the first and second representatives coming out of Japan facing emerging regions, if Sengoku were to go there as a second seed off of this split and to do well in that tournament,
I think OPL's the best region for us to play against.
OPL, but
it would be an interesting one,
Southeast Asia and whatever. There are plenty of other, just
a
hypothetical tournament.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter necessarily. Well, I guess it does kind of matter in terms of the regions. If Sengoku were to give an admirable performance, dropping 1 or 2 games, but winning that competition, would it be a success at that point? We don't have it, of course, because now they have to
win or become only below DFM. They have to beat anybody else they play against. And and even the top seed of other emerging regions, if they don't beat them, or if this is a team that DFM lose to and then Sengoku lose to, they look fucking awful.
They do.
Well, I mean,
it's just another risk, but is it another chance for success?
Oh no, 100%. They have to do it. You have to go all or nothing.
Here's an interesting point, right?
Because that's fear of losing before you play.
Yeah. Because some players reckon that it's better to do well in a group stage than it is to win an NA split. So, for instance, Double F has said that he would have preferred to get out of groups than he would do to win NA. Of course, that comes from his own context. Talk about that 2018 Vitality group again, that roster again. They had that fantastic Worlds performance. They didn't get out of groups, but they are remembered for that. You could win the LJL and do crap at Worlds, like Rampage losing all their world games.
Like, sadly, DFM has done for the last few years.
Yeah, they had a better showing last time, but the one before that, 2018, was not good.
2019 wasn't much better.
Sure, but then you kind of say, okay, if there was another competition where you had 2 seeds and then you had a chance to perform internationally, even if it is against emerging regions, would this be a successful split for Sengoku if they did well at that?
It improves it, but they have to come only second to DFM or win it all out. I
think if they did the first seed of another region, I would call that a middling success, actually.
Wow.
I mean, there's a lot of expectations on this team.
I mean, part of the reason we are being so black and white is because there is only one spot to represent Japan internationally at the minute.
That's the problem.
And that is the reason we are being so black and white, is because that is the margin for success, it's win or fail, because otherwise you do not get out of Japan. And when you put this much money and this many sort of like stellar players into a roster, then effectively you are saying we want to be the guys to go international. And when that's you, it's not like you're in the LEC. It's not like you're in the LCK where you've got 3 representatives. That's just not an option.
No, and I mean that is the case for a lot of the other emerging regions, right? I think the VCS is the only other emerging region that has 2. So if VCS is the only one that gets... Yeah, VCS has 2. So the LJL and almost every other emerging region, Turkey, Mexico, all only have 1 still at the moment. Now, there are other ways to potentially get another team in through Challenger Circuit and all this other things and the Invitational and blah, blah, blah. There are other ways to potentially get 1 extra team, but they're very few and far between, and normally they're more meant for the Challenger teams. They're not meant for the actual teams playing on a competitive tournament level like the LJL.
We don't have a wildcard regionless team thing that certain other competitions do.
Yes, so when it comes down to that, I do look at Sengoku and I go, yeah, I think they had a fine split. I mean, I think this is fine. I think there are very concerning alarm bells, and I don't know if everyone's going to quite get... Like, the thing is, right, we can say, okay, Sengoku get to Worlds, great. Now, if they just repeat what DFM do...
If they lose all their games at Worlds, it's pretty bad.
Well, if they they have to, if they don't get into group stage, like, what does it matter? We might as well just have DFM do that again.
If they do like Loki Esports did, which was from VCS actually as well, and they take a game off of Damwon, Korean 3rd seed, I would call that a success.
Would
actually.
you?
At that point, I'm like, okay, you've gotten out of your group and play-ins, and you've managed to. I mean, remember, DFM. I don't think DFM have even gotten to the play-in.
They've never gotten to group.
DFM got out of the
They've never got to knockout.
No, they didn't get. They got to. Yes, they did. Didn't they do the knockout versus Splice?
No, they lost that.
No, they were in the same group.
They didn't get out. DFM have never made groups. They've never made groups.
I'm not talking groups. I thought once you got to the best of 5 is what I'm talking about. Because there's the best of 5 you have between the number 1 and number 2s of various groups to get into groups at the end of play-ins.
Or you can just do good in play-ins and just get there.
No. So in 2018 they lost against EDG. Yeah, so they had it at that point. Okay, so I was wrong. But
yes.
Yeah. But no, I think Sengoku would have to. This is the problem. This is why it's so fickle. If you come up against Chinese, NA, EU, and now of course LCK as well, 3rd seeds in group stage or whatever, in the play-in group stage, after you've reached you've got top 2 in your play-in group. You then have to play the best of 5. You come up against one of these Titans and you're just there. It's like, can you beat them in a best of 5? That's a hard ask. That is a really hard ask.
Yeah.
And we've seen teams like Gambit lose 3-2, Vegas Squadron 3-2 to Cloud9 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
So what would actually be a successful split with this amount of investment? Heck, I don't know. If you get a good group draw and you get into groups, that is absolutely a success. Everything else is a middling shade of grey. That's the problem I've got with this question.
But I mean, to be honest, that is... I think that comes back to a point that I think we all harbour to some degree for the LJL, and I think that's what that is the baseline of expectations for now any team that goes to Worlds. We need a team to go and actually hit the main event of the group stage, because if you don't, what is this region doing outside of just getting a pity invite? And I hate to say this about the LJL, but like that's really what needs to start happening, because until a team actually gets to the main group stage, we're just getting an invite which doesn't even get us to groups because we've not proven that we deserve that first.
Nope.
Yep.
VCS has proved that. That's why they're getting 2 invitations. They have proved that time and again, so that's why they're getting 2 invites to Worlds.
They've done all right for themselves, haven't
they?
Particularly at MSIs and stuff.
Exactly, right? MSIs, we sometimes do worse, which is concerning when we're doing worse at MSI than we do sometimes at Worlds. Now, obviously, we've said we do great at Rift Rivals, some of these one-on-ones, All-Stars, we sometimes have some really fun performances and do half decently.
Same level.
Exactly, right?
We've talked about what the LJL really needs as a region as well, because actually it's gaining popularity within the region. And of course, we'd like to help out a little bit for the English language as well. But the thing which would help the most is pull your socks up, tie your bootlaces real tight, and go kick someone important in the arse.
Yeah,
that's really
That's it.
Go really raise some eyebrows and go, oh shit, this is the team.
You need to pull a Gigabytes. You need to pull an Albus Nox, right?
Yeah. So then going back to the question of, is this a successful split for Sengoku?
It's fine.
Barely.
It's fine.
Barely.
It's fine.
It is.
Yeah,
Sure. It's
that's
somewhere in between. It's obviously it's not the top, which you can. It's not as black and white as we'd like it to be. It depends on what they do in summer. We'll get back to you on that. It's an interesting question. And yeah, so that was a really interesting thing to go through.
I mean, it just comes down to the boiling point of Sengoku played pretty decently. They played some really good games. They did punt a few games as well, but I think that's to be expected, as we've all said, that this is a brand new roster. This is coming into it, trying to figure out how everybody works and everything else, and you've maybe not got quite the best players in every single role, but you're doing the best you can, and with time, you can gel it out, right? So, eventually, this will be a team that, come Worlds, like Nymaera is saying, come Summer Split, if they continue to perform and just get better and better as they've been going on throughout the split, there's a chance. But
Always a chance.
till then, it's going to be hard. And then remember, not just Sengoku are going to be getting better. DFM now know they've definitely got some rivalry in V3 and Sengoku. Hawks need to figure out. Axis did better than CGA than CGA in the regular splits, so now that's something that they're going to be worried about. Burning Core are fucking burning everything, because now they've just lost their one of their long-time standing mid players in Rocky leaving, so that's going to be interesting. And I mean, this might just be a really good shake-up for the region as a whole, right? Having potentially a new king, or at least people trying to fight for that title, raises a lot of interesting questions. And if they do well and they do well at Worlds, maybe we don't lose Blank Empyrean.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, right? The question is if they don't make it to Worlds, and then corporate, you know, whatever backers decide that this isn't a success and they want to pull the plug on some of the funding, does this just dissuade other teams from trying to make competitive rosters? You know, I think that we've had some real winners this split which have been cost efficient. I think that potentially V3 are amongst them. You know, they lost Yutori Miyashi. That's probably some money saved. As much as Archer made a debut, and a debutant player is always going to be cheaper than someone with tenure and following to them. And, you know, they lost Baby as well, went over to the PCS and won there. So perhaps they maybe broke even. They maybe broke even. I'm not sure, because Boogie was probably came with a price tag and stuff. But, you know, I think that, you know, for them to hit third again, make playoffs again, I think that's a very successful split from what we expect from V3. I think Axis, of course, as well, you know, coming in and light with, you know, they brought in some new members as well, but to have this huge run of form make playoffs for the first time, you know, you're looking at these teams, like, this is why I'm also hesitant to say, is Sengoku had like a very it's not a very successful split. Yeah, like you said, Lexie, it's fine, but compare it to in the context of some of the other teams and what they've achieved this split, they have to be looking there and kind of going, yeah, some of these teams have done really well.
Yeah.
I think until DFM's crown has been taken,
who the fuck knows?
It doesn't matter. And that's the kind of crazy thing, right? It doesn't matter what happens until DFM don't have that crown. They are the team to beat, and while we always rip into Initialize being like, haha, you're the glory hunter, until any of our teams actually beat him, he has the complete right to say that. Because how long have you been winning? Oh, since Rampage and Pentagram. Oh, okay, well, I guess we'll just say fuck it. All right.
That's how we lost in 2017.
Yeah, 2017, 2018 was the last times anybody else could win in this region.
It's like the old adage of never bet against SKT, right?
Oh, I mean, you still shouldn't really bet against SKT, right? In the grand scheme of things.
They got a good win rate.
TSM era of NA and stuff, you just sat there like, legit, what can you do?
Well, now it's C9, right? Don't bet against C9.
But it's one split. See if they manage to keep it in something like a dynasty, like DFM have done it.
And that's going to be the question. Till Sengoku or till V3 or anybody other of these teams, I'd love it to see Axis raise that trophy and go to Worlds. I would love to see it, because that's such a Cinderella story. We're starting to come up, guys. We can do this, and then all the way to the clouds. I'd be like.
The analyst in me is saying very unlikely.
I would
love to see it. Play by play, and he's like, yes, this is what I want.
Miracles can happen. We've seen miracles before happen, so I mean, they'd have to run up probably the gauntlet. I'm saying they're gonna have to go through losers bracket. It'll be a long fight, but it'd be dope to see. I mean, we saw V3 begin the gauntlet run. They got against DFM, and then what? But what indeed? Indeed. And obviously Axis need to first beat DFM in regular split for that to even happen. But then I mean, there are things that we've been saying on this cast where I've been pulling for more games need to be played and everything else, which, I mean, that would help Sengoku, right?
I think so. I think it definitely would. And also seeing best of threes would definitely up the coach's game as well. I think we definitely see some of the more strategic pick and ban teams get through, get through larger, better win rates. I was trying to word things and it didn't work.
Figure out the correct way to do it. Yeah.
No, go.
I know. I just think overall it's going to be something that's just going to keep evolving, and hopefully Sengoku can perform. I think for me, this was a fine split. Moving forward, they need to keep performing and winning, and that's where I'm going to end it. If for you guys want to do any last ending thoughts here before we move on to question time.
I think it's really hard to answer questions like that, which is why we've laboured the point again, because you can flit about it all you want, but honestly, for an emerging region, there are only so many things you can measure success in, and that's like international performance and wins.
And you get one slot.
Yeah, one slot. So it's really kind of hard. But no, I'd love to see Sengoku shake things up. I think it'd be really cool. I mean, if not, if DFM, even if it forces DFM to go Super Saiyan Blue or whatever it is.
Competition is important, right? And
it is. Even if, it's good for the region either way that they're competitors. So, for me as an analyst, it's a success that they're even here and contending. But that's obviously not them on a money standpoint.
Not to drag it on any further, but one last thing actually is before we kind of do go on to that question. What happens if, of course, like to keep this level of competition in the LJL kind of requires a certain amount of money. If that money isn't coming with a return on investment because DFM are still winning or still keeping better, actually, do we just see the quality of the LJL drop as a result? Because there is only that one slot.
Who the heck knows, man? Who the heck knows?
I mean, from a business perspective, if you look at it and you invest money and you're seeing zero return on investment and it's in a volatile market like esports, and then you're not doing a vague esports brand, you're specifically within the LJL. What does that mean? Yeah, I think if you're getting a return on investment and your time for that ROI is approximately 1 or 2 years, and you're putting a lot of money up front and you're not seeing that return, I think the region's just going to kind of lose out. And I mean, yes, it's great for the teams that can be established like DFM, but I'd be very concerned that everybody just cares for DFM and no other team gets it, and it will just. I think that's why we see the rise of 1 or 2 teams and then fall of a lot of it, because DFM have the money to pay for the best players of the region, and if they want upgrades, they can pay for it. They haven't needed upgrades because no one else is asking for them. So I think Sengoku basically have to win because they need to basically get that crown, because that's how you can get more fans in Japan, right?
For sure, I agree.
I think that's why the only reason Axis has been seeing some success and probably money coming in, because they suddenly went from a last place team to a playoffs team.
Yeah.
And it's not quite like the Champions League or whatever, when like if you progress, you're going to get X amount of extra money because of extra TV time and stuff. The advertising rights and stuff like that. It doesn't really work that way in esports right now.
Well, can do sometimes. Franchises helps that.
Not within the LJL right now.
It's not nearly the same kind of level. It's not like it's not the same kind of level like that.
Okay. But so I just wanted to bring that question up as something that might be another potential fear of the system as is.
I mean, it's a fair enough thing. I mean, I would love to talk to owners, and potentially that might be something we will do in the future, as we've had messages in regards to that. But I mean, that's a whole nother thing. That's the business side, which I can talk about for years about. But
hear it, man. Another episode.
It's another episode, and it's also something where you have to look at it and go, well, until those W's come in, why do you care? Right? It's why Axis is a very successful brand, because they also have the SGC and other scenes in their thing. DFM have a similar thing. Lots of other teams do other things. Sengoku are a brand new organization, relatively speaking, only been around for a few years, have thrown a fuckload of money probably at this roster. Not shitloads, but a fair amount.
Within the context of the LJL, definitely.
Within the context, of the LJL. I mean, to keep someone like Steel and Gang around for so long, there's probably good money in there for them. you have to imagine Pyrian and Blanca probably on at least similar money, and that's just assuming only the Koreans, right?
Yeah. I mean, Yutaro he's not going to be cheap. Let's not beat around the bush.
Boogie and Ardia, let's be honest. They're going to be asking for pay rises.
Oh, 100%. They're both going to be asking for it when their contracts come back around in at the end of this. They're going to be like, guys, I basically got this team all the way here, and they can be like, I got this team here, or I was doing this crazy stuff, and Rascal Jester had to 5v1 me for the game for them to win, and they go, oh, all right, you can 5v1. You're like a fib of it. And he's like, yeah, kind of, and they go, all right, let's sign this man up. I can just see it coming in. TSM Ardia. Yes, I might. No, wait, no. TSM Boogie. TSM Boogie. It fixes the jungle. Oh, we figured it out.
No.
Yes.
Oh,
I figured it out. I figured it out. I'm gonna get in talks with Lita. We'll get it sorted. We'll get it sorted. She'll sort me out. She'll be like, absolutely, I listened to you, and I'll be like,
yeah, you've got that kind of clout.
yeah, absolutely.
Message on Double Lift stream. It'll be
fun.
Sorry. Just
but I mean, Lenovo, if you sponsor us, we won't blame you for things. By the way,
my bad. Okay.
we're looking for a sponsor. That's
it.
We could have been dropping it all this time. How many hours we are into this shit now?
Only an hour and a half as we're coming into our questions, so it's totally fine. We do have a question for our lovely community. We do ask for questions from our community. We do know that they've been in a slight lull state as our content has been in a lull state. So
Thank you
I mean,
for putting up with us pinging everyone.
We
on the
love
channel.
you.
only once a week. Well, twice a week. Once when we ask for it, and then the other time when we've got it done. So
Yeah.
that's how that was. Stardust of the VCS. I can't remember their exact position in the VCS because I've got currently Discord in full screen.
I think he used to be a moderator.
Moderator. Very good.
I don't remember that.
They ask us the question: which VCS player would we like to see in the LJL? Gentlemen. Oh, go on, Nymaera, go on.
So
you're wafting a glue stick around or something.
It's actually like chapstick.
Oh, okay, close enough. Glue stick, chapstick, basically the same
I'm
thing.
sure anyone who watches the video for this stuff realizes that I just find random stuff to fiddle with. It's just a thing now. I didn't even know I had that habit, and now
Put
I
my
do.
pencils off to the side.
This is what the LJL does to me. But yeah, my first thought was absolutely Dire 1. This guy's a great mid laner. I'd love to see him versus Ardia. But we kind of already have a bit of mid lane competition in the LJL right now. And then I kind of thought about Boogie and how this one player came in and just kind of just blew our world in a lot of ways. This guy came in, just revolutionized a lot of what we thought about LJL jungle. And then I thought,
yeah,
which role could really use something like that? Something that could really overhaul something which has kind of been well established. And what I would say, I'd love to see Flash's top laner Yoshino. Because this guy comes in and he plays stuff like Fiora, he plays stuff like Cannon. He comes in, he split pushes, he takes the game by force. And I'd love to see someone finally challenge Ebby. I would love to see that because we've seen people come and go, but no one's really managed to really make Ebby sweat in that same way. So for me, it has to be Yoshino from Flash.
I was wondering very similar things. I think the other one for me would be, I do think Dire 1 would be great. Because actually, I think a lot of the mid laners in the LJL are generally of a particular breed. We don't have that many super aggressive mid laners. We don't. I mean, Arya is kind of there. But actually, the likes of Pyrian, of Seros, who else is a good shout on this one? I suppose those two probably good ones.
Control mid laners. It's only
Control. They play that really well. They do.
To be honest, it's only really those two that were able to really kind of give it to everybody else. It was kind of they would just dish it out and everybody else would accept it. Ace was like arguably fine, but wasn't the greatest, right?
Yeah,
like,
he was occasionally a liability, but solid on other times.
I think Gadiadu is maybe the other.
Yeah, Gadiadu, Ramone, maybe Ninja, like these guys who have play patterns, play style.
Have a cream of decent mid laners. Top laners sometimes is a bit sparse outside of Ebby.
It's Ray Farkey.
Yeah. I mean, we got exactly.
We have Ray Farkey. Bless him. I hope he gets onto a better team or Burning Core can fix their problems. Right.
My point being, I think Dire 1 would actually potentially be able to punish the likes of maybe Seros or Pyrian who do like their safer picks. Like if Pyrian picked a Victor into a guy like Dire 1, you could see that being exactly there would be that kind of thing. And we don't have that kind of player we don't have that many players. It's Aria, I guess. And you've got people who want to be that player, the likes of Garriara and Ramane, but haven't pulled it off on the same level. You pull in someone with the mechanics of Dire 1, with the play style of Dire 1, and I think potentially you change the way the LJL has to play.
Well, this is the thing, right? I just remember Pyrian's Azir in the finals in game 1, where he was actually punishing Seros. I'm like, okay, cool, he's playing aggressively on a scaling pick. And I kind of like, in some ways, like, that's what I would expect, but more so from Dire 1 in terms of like picking the Tristana and the Syndra and everything and just like solo killing people across the board. That's kind of what he does. But yeah, no, that's why I thought Dire 1 at first. I thought Yoshino's most played champion is Fiora. That would absolutely screw over the LJL.
So I thought
that could be brilliant too.
I thought along the same lines as you, I wanted to put God, names are hard to remember sometimes. The same mid laner that you've both said.
Dire 1. Yeah,
Dire 1, yeah. But then I was like, wait a second. I totally agree. Top lane is the far bigger problem because it's Ebby and Rayfarki, and then everybody else is below in my eyes at the moment.
I think I agree.
I think Appaman and Paz and Nap are like the step below.
They're serviceable.
Yeah, they're serviceable, but I still think Rayfarki can beat almost all of them.
I agree.
Pretty comfortably, and then Ebby's just above him. Rayfarki was the only man that really kind of competed. We all know I love a person that can do a little bit of a lane swap and then go back to it. It's why I love perks and caps so much. Kian.
Who are you talking here?
The top laner for Gam. Yeah. He's a man that can play both mid and top. He's a man that is very flexible in his champion pool. He's a man that recently won the Pulsefire Cup. Yes, they came second to Flash in the VCS Spring.
Pulsefire was scuffed as fuck, though.
I mean, they won it.
We saw Corky top, Lexie. We saw Corky top lane.
Yeah, I mean that's just showing a mid laner that can play top lane.
Oh god.
I'm okay with that kind of stuff.
This is what you like, Ash. Yeah, this is your break.
Oh yeah, people that can play more than one fucking champion, I'm very happy about. Shit. This is why everyone was bitching about Soroka top lane, and I'm like, no, this is actually good for the environment. If people learn to play more champions, the meta game actually evolves. We don't just get stuck in this. This is why we're still playing like season fucking 2 Moscow 5 bullshit. We haven't evolved since then fully. We've had meta games and changes.
Obviously the peak of evolution. You don't
Clearly, in Moscow, we need to have Moscow 5 teach us the next evolution, because this is why VCS is actually popping. Because I mean, I might flame them for doing Shyvana jungle AP Shyvana, which no other region do. At least they're doing something different.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And in the grand scale of things, yeah, Corky top is a bit experimental, but I mean,
so the whole thing about Pulsefire is that you had to have two champions on your team every game that had a Pulsefire or Centurion skin.
Yeah.
And every other champion can only be picked or banned once every series.
Yeah, that makes me
when you get through to game 5 or game 4, and you've had, okay, so how many bans have you got? So you got 10 bans and 10 picks, and then 4 of those are not. So for each game you got 10, and you've got 16 champions removed from the pool, and then you've got 150 champions. Like, effectively, at the end of that, you're going to get so 100. So it's like, by the end of that, you've eliminated over half the champion pool. Like, so in that series alone, in the 4 games they played in the finals, you had almost a full season's worth of competitive presence. It was like 65 champion picks.
Just shows people that can play.
It's super scuffed.
It was so much fun, though.
At the same time, I love it because it's just like more random things. And if anyone from the LJL is listening to us, if you do a tournament like that for the LJL, we will 100% cover all of it.
Oh, yeah.
All of it.
Probably live if it's like the same as Pulsefire.
Who's gonna win that? Rascal fucking Jester.
Oh yeah, I love it. But then, what does that mean for the region? We get to see more games and we get more tournaments. And someone like Rascal Jester, who are like, guys, we can play every champion, right, in every role. And they go, yeah, I can play ADC support. And they go, all right, so we'll put Vivid on Misfortune support again.
It's suddenly when Seros goes like, I guess it's just time I pull out this pick I'm not playing one.
But then, like, on the other hand, you've got Paz who played 4 champions. He's gonna last precisely 1 game, and then Paz will be playing support because that's it.
I mean, but then that means that feels a problem for that player. Because, I mean, if we go back to the whole drafting thing that we were talking about earlier off stream, my whole problem is Paz needs to play 10 champions. He can't. It's a problem. problem.
It's like you're not even allowed to load into draft pick without owning 16 champions. This
Yeah.
guy would fail to do that off
Yes.
of his regular season
I mean,
champion.
almost everybody would fail
Yeah,
that,
fairness,
really.
most people.
But like, I think that's a whole nother thing, which was going to be our ending topic, but now it seems like that will be our full topic for next week's podcast. We figured it out, lads. We were able to fill this podcast for 1 hour and 40 minutes, and we somehow did it. Pulsefire was scuffed as fuck, but I mean, if we get... I mean, we could do that for... I'm sure there's... Is there a Japanese skin line out, really? That's, like, Japanese focus?
Star Guardians.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Star Guardian Cup.
There was a Japanese theme song for Star Guardians.
I mean, there's the Tom Kench where he's a sushi chef, right? So he can...
it's Akali who's the sushi.
Akali's got a sushi one as well.
I thought,
yeah.
what is Tom Kench's fish skin?
Master Chef thing. Something like that. Find out.
And then there's the whole Baker barbecue skin line as well.
I mean,
So, like,
it'd be cool if the LJL could do something like that, right?
it's because of the Pulsefire event. That's why.
Oh,
they
I'm
did it.
fully aware, but at that same time, it's like, man,
Next Star Guardian release. Yeah, LJL, go have your anime party.
do that.
It is Master Tom Kent, just what it is.
Master Chef, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, Star Guardian. They literally have done an anime line. Do a Star Guardian Cup where one Star Guardian must always be played, both teams.
Maybe we'll finally see Ari in competitive play.
I mean, we might see Ari. We'll also see Urgot, because you have to include the pajama party.
Jeez.
Oh yes.
Star Guardian pajama party has to be it, right? Like, Urgot legit is already maybe sleeper pick for competitive play, and now like legit might be competitive viable, and then it's like, oh, we get to see him in his beautiful form, his final form, as some would say, the form that we've been asking for since his release, and then he got reworked, and we've still been asking for it. So,
Oh gosh.
I think that ends our podcast of episode 17. Gentlemen, I'm actually really impressed that we got to episode 17, and we'll be starting the LJL Summer Split. First episode of the Summer Split will be episode 20, so we've actually done this perfectly somehow. At some point, it's going to go to shit, and we're going to be on like 69, and it's going to be halfway through the season. We'll be like, 69. But, I mean, we'll figure it out. But... as always, I hand it over to both Nymaera first and then Initialize to give us any of their closing thoughts on this podcast and the topics we've covered.
I haven't eaten in like 9 hours. I'm going delirious, but we managed to get through it. Congrats, guys.
Yeah. I think some good quality conversations about kind of League in general. I think particularly that conversation about Sengoku Gaming. What does it mean to be successful in an emerging region when
we became philosophers?
Well, yeah, but a little bit of that kind of conversation about the bar to succeed is kind of first place a lot of time, and that's kind of powerful stuff. I think it was an interesting conversation. So yeah, congrats, lads. It was good fun, and we'll have to crack out the beers for next week because we are in the UK, and episode 18 will be the drinking age, so that'll be the option.
Have a few bevies on
That's
this.
it. Get some tinnies out.
Get some.
Get your red stripe. Get
them out. Get a few bevies going, lads. Got to get some shrimp on the barbie, even though we're British. So it would be fish and chips.
I'd be alright with the barbie. That'd be great.
I would actually love a barbecue right now.
More
This lovely weather.
More play bug. I really want.
Mate, I just want to be chilling outside, having a few. But we could actually, if we were able to, we could do an outside podcast episode. But
we're not allowed.
Till we're able to do that, we will stay inside in this warm weather, and one day we might be able to do an outside podcast episode. One day. But till then, I have been one of your three co-hosts. I've thoroughly enjoyed this episode, and I think I'm looking forward to also discussing our topic that we didn't get to do. But I do agree. I think we got some really interesting things of comparing all the other regions to where we are currently now, as well as also reflecting on the old LJL. So we agreed that they've evolved, we've gotten better, and we're looking forward to the future. Sengoku, their success currently moving forward will be interesting to see. And then obviously, apparently we also want the LJL to have more tournaments. So apparently, get on that, Riot Japan. Give us the Star Guardian pajama party that we deserve, because weebs want time as well. But for myself, Nymaera and Initialize, Thank you so much for watching and or listening, and we'll be back at you next week with more LJL goodness. Take care and have a wonderful day.
Ohio.